Cascade Towing by Stephen Lake. Cab 42, this is dispatch. Over, came a voice over the radio. Two men, both of whom wore matching coveralls and baseball caps, sat in the cab of their Starship tow truck and quietly snored. Cab 42, this is dispatch. Over, came the voice over the radio again. However, neither man stirred. Cab 42, can you hear me? Over, said the voice more insistently this time. Once again, neither man stirred. Joe Bob and Billy Joe, you two better not be sleeping again. Joe Bob, the man who was sitting behind the wheel, stirred slightly. Hey, Billy, we probably ought to answer that, he said. Not long after this, the second man stirred, grabbed the radio, and keyed the mic. Yeah, dispatch, we're here. What you got? He said. Were you two sleeping again? Came the angry voice on the other end. Nah, just busy trying not to get hit by asteroids again, replied Billy. There was a brief pause, followed by an angry grunt from the other end. Well, if you two imbeciles would stop parking in debris lanes, you wouldn't have to. Both men grinned. We know. So what you got for us? I have a request from a local spaceport to do a junk recovery tow of an abandoned starship that's clogging up one of their ports. Think you can handle that? The two men perked up and looked briefly at each other. That sounds like a lucrative job, said Joe Bob. Billy thought about this briefly, and then keyed the mic. Yeah, we'll get it taken care of for you. Just send us the coordinates, and we'll do the rest as usual, he replied. A few moments later, the towing information appeared on a screen on their dashboard, showing them where the job site was. Welp, better get this show on the road if we want to get paid, said Joe Bob. He then put the Starship tow truck into flight mode and began racing towards their destination at superluminal speeds. Upon arriving, they found an older spaceport that was filled with traffic of all kinds ranging from civilian to military, new to old, and everything in between. They then checked the work order on their dash screen and soon identified their target. It looks like we'll be towing that old wreck parked in that berth over there, said Joe Bob. Yeah, I think you're mighty right on that, replied Billy. The two then flew over to the spaceport and got a good look at what they would be towing. However, what they found surprised them. Huh, that looks like an old nat gas tanker, said Joe Bob. Yeah, it does. I wonder why it was abandoned here, given that its tank is full, replied Billy. Joe Bob looked at Billy in surprise. It's full, he asked. Billy nodded. As full can get. Why do you think they left it like that? Joe Bob shrugged. The ship probably broke down, and it was cheaper just to abandon it than get it fixed, despite the cargo they were carrying. Oh, well, that's a shame. The two men then backed their truck up to the Starship, latched onto it with a tractor beam, and began pulling it out of its mooring. However, the ship didn't move, as it was still firmly moored to the dock. Seeing this, Billy picked up the mic and keyed it. Hey, Starship Control? Yeah, we're here to tow away that abandoned nat gas tanker you've got parked there in Dock 26. But we can't move it because the moorings are still in place. Can you guys cut her loose so we can get this ship out of here for you? He said. Roger that, tow truck. Releasing now, came the reply. A few moments later, both men felt their tow truck lurch slightly as the station released the moorings that were holding the ship in place. Upon feeling this, Joe Bob increased the throttle on the truck as he began to accelerate away. However, it was only seconds later that their truck lurched to a sudden stop. What the heck? Said Joe Bob in surprise. Billy looked behind them and noticed that the nat gas ship didn't seem stuck, but it still refused to budge. Oh, it's probably just snagged on something. Give it a little more power, he said. You got it, replied Joe Bob. He then pushed the throttle all the way open and felt the truck shudder under him as its engines went to full power. However, it was only a moment later when their radio crackled to life again. Tow truck, cut your engines. That's not a derelict ship. That's our emergency nat gas supply. We forgot we were using it for that, shouted the station over the radio. The two men looked at each other in confusion for a split second before they suddenly felt their tow truck launch itself forward with a jolt as the nat gas tanker ripped itself free from the station as the fuel lines that were connecting it to the station suddenly and catastrophically shattered. This caused a stream of high-pressure nat gas to rush out of the tanks at the rear of the tanker, instantly turning it into a galactic bottle rocket that shoved their tow truck along like a go-kart on Red Bull. Both men immediately screamed in surprise as they worked frantically to get their truck under control. But in the process of this effort, their truck was so violently spun around that it launched the nat gas tanker away from themselves like they were a galactic trebuchet. Normally, that would have been the end of it, given the general vastness of space. However, in this case, the direction in which the tanker was thrown was not empty. It contained a large and powerful Imperial battleship that had stopped over at the station for some shore leave. Moments later, the spinning nat gas tanker crashed into the Imperial battleship, causing the tanker and its large cargo of nat gas to explode in a spectacular fireball. This surprised the crew of the battleship and sent them immediately into red alert. Meanwhile, as they were trying to determine what had just happened, Joe Bob and Billy continued to struggle with all their might to get their tow truck under control. Eventually, they were able to bring it to a safe and secure stop a short distance away. Certain that they were no longer in danger, they took a few minutes to check themselves for damage, and thankfully found none, much to their great relief. "Woo-wee, was that ever a mess?" said Billy in surprise. Joe Bob nodded slightly as he held the wheel with a death grip. "Yes, it was," he said, a thick cloud of anxiety echoing in his voice. After finally getting their wits about them, the two men began scanning the area for the missing nat gas tanker, and soon found it. Or rather, what was left of it. Both men's jaws dropped in shocked horror when they realized that it had collided with a nearby Imperial battleship, leaving a fiery gash in the ship's side. The color soon drained from both men's faces. "Oh, we so can rode up fair this one," said Billy. However, before either man could say a word, the Imperial battleship opened fire on the space station. Both men cocked an eyebrow at this. "Wait, is they shooting at the station and not us?" "I mean, that was our fault," said Joe Bob. "Sure looks that way," replied Billy. Just then their all-bands channel crackled to life. "Imperial battleship, cease fire. Cease fire. Why are you shooting at us? You launched a surprise attack on us and damaged our ship. That wasn't our fault. Liars. Prepare to be destroyed." Both Billy and Joe Bob looked at each other anxiously for a moment before looking back at the battle that was unfolding in front of them. Joe Bob, I think we should probably back out of here. We don't want nothing to do with this pig swaller that's going on," said Billy. Joe Bob immediately put the truck in reverse and said, "I wholeheartedly agree." After backing off to a safe distance, the two men then sat there quietly in their truck and watched as the station and the battleship duked it out with each other. Moments later, several other starships, including cruisers, destroyers, and random civilian ships, jumped into the area and began firing on the Imperial battleship, who returned fire in kind. "Imperial battleship, how dare you attack an innocent, neutral space station like this?" came a call from one of those ships. "They are not innocent. They attacked us first. We are merely delivering well-deserved retribution for their heinous act of cowardice." Both men's eyebrows crept up slightly at this. What had started out as a simple tow job had quickly devolved into an all-out war. Just then a pair of Republic battleships jumped into the area and opened fire on the Imperial battleship as well. "Republic battleships, stay out of this. It's not your fight," said the Imperial battleship. "Then cease fire immediately. You are illegally firing on neutral civilian facilities and privately owned vessels," replied the Republic battleships. "They started it. I don't care. Stop immediately. Not until they say they're sorry." Both men's eyebrows crept up slightly more at this. "Yeah, Liz is going to hang us out to dry for this one," said Billy. "You don't tell her nothing, and we won't get in trouble," replied Joe Bob. Billy nodded at this. "All right, I ain't saying nothing then, boss," he replied. Not long after this, still more Imperial battleships jumped into the area and opened fire. Shortly after this, another group of ships jumped into the area and, being uncertain of who was fighting who, opened fire on everyone, who then returned fire in kind. As this continued to unfold and escalate, Joe Bob put the truck in a drive, turned, and began making his way out of the area. "Where you going?" asked Billy. "Home, before we get into any more trouble," replied Joe Bob. Billy pondered this briefly before finally nodding in agreement. "Good idea. I mean, this is already going to look bad on our report. No point making it any worse for ourselves. Joe Bob nodded at this. You got that right. The end.